Okay, let me know if you see my screen.
It's coming up. Okay, very good.
All right, let me move this somewhere else. Your beautiful faces. Here we go. All right, well, before I begin, I want to thank you for being here, for your support, for guiding me through this very long journey. One of the pretty much one of those experiences that I never thought I would get to experience, but I am here, and I truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your support. My name is Michelle Mendivil. I'm a PhD candidate with a program here at GCU of Doctor of Philosophy and General Psychology, with an emphasis in integrating technology, learning, and psychology. The topic I chose to give my study was adults' perception of wearable fitness devices on psychological well-being and motivation to engage in physical activities. Here's an overview of the agenda of what we'll tackle today. First, I'll go into the background. I'll address the critical feasibility items from AQR5. I will go into details as to how I conducted the research study, how I went into data analysis, go into the process and some examples. I will then go into presenting the results, so showing you all the overall structure of my data analysis and how I then conducted and completed all the result components. Then go into implications and then share a reflection of my doctoral experience. So if we dig into the background here, so we know motivation and psychological well-being remain key challenges among us adults. Motivation influences human conduct, stimulating engagement, persistence, and social connection. That was by Roderick 2000. Research indicates that greater participation in physical activity does improve well-being, immune function, and a few other components. That was by Sin and Steptoe. Through the background and all the literature review I did in chapter 2, there were three corresponding research studies that I overall did the foundation for this study. So those three studies were from News 2021, Rube 2018, and Safat 2022, where they also study wearable fitness devices. Each study slightly different flavor, and overall, all of these three studies didn't really go into the details of understanding how wearable fitness devices influence motivation and psychological well-being, which then allow me to create, the study purpose and then utilizing the theoretical framework of self-determination theory that was developed by Deci and Ryan in '85, which really self-determination theory explains how motivation varies along a continuum from control to autonomous. And one person can meet self-determination by following these three key components. So autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When these three components are met, the individuals feel satisfied. And what that means is that autonomy is when one person feels in control of one's action. The competence means that they feel capable and effective. And then relatedness, meaning that they can connect with others. So they can relate about something, and that overall, it's the framework for theoretical framework here for my dissertation. And all of those components, it's again the framework for me to be able to develop this study. If we go into the problem and purpose statement, as I mentioned, the literature overall helped me put these problem statements together. And so the problem statement here is that it was not known how adults 18 years of age and older describe the influence of wearable fitness devices on psychological well-being and motivation to engage in physical activities. That then allowed me to create the purpose statement of this qualitative descriptive study to explore how adults 18 years and older describe the influence of wearable fitness devices on psychological well-being and motivation to engage in physical activities in the Western US. Again, as I described before, the research gaps were addressed with limited understanding on how wearable fitness influence motivation and psychological well-being, which then using self-determination theory allowed me to then start exploring how motivation and overall the engagement in physical activities is driven by these wearable fitness devices. All right, so if we go into what I set to do, where I ended up doing, and why this design. So I set out to explore how adults describe the influence of wearables to motivation and psychological well-being using self-determination. I was sought out to uncover features that the devices have that could be in alignment to SCT, so influence, autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When I did the study, I identified key themes showing that, in fact, wearable fitness devices do promote motivation, self-awareness, and emotional well-being, as well as accountability. And these wearable fitness devices, in fact, are tools that are utilized to empower and pretty much have consistency in folks to be able to move and stay active. This study will contribute to healthcare and fitness professionals in supporting how technology, motivation, and wellness all play a big part in someone's well-being. And I utilize a qualitative descriptive design study to be able to capture authentic participant experiences that will and have allowed me to understand firsthand accountability and how they describe and how these devices make them feel. Overall, this allowed me to do the study by using a qualitative descriptive and being able to gather a lot of data from all the participants I had. From the theoretical framework, the problem statement, I was able to then produce these two research questions, utilizing, again, self-determination theory. So research question one here is, or was, how do adults 18 years of age and older describe the influence of wearable fitness devices on psychological well-being? So RQ1 is looking at the psychological well-being component of the wearables. And then RQ2 is how do adults 18 years of age and older describe the influence of wearable fitness devices on motivation to engage in physical activities. So RQ2 is describing how these wearables then empower, allow folks to motivate and engage in physical activities. My population, so the population here, the general population were adults who wear fitness devices in the western region of the US. The target population were 18 years and older adults in the western US that own a wearable fitness device. The sample here was targeted to be 20 individuals, although I only had 19 participants. I used convenience sampling to access participants through social media that allowed me to have access to those active wearers of wearable fitness devices and provide that rich experience-based insights on the study focus. Through this, I completed a recruitment plan. I had plan A and plan B. Plan A was to post a electronic flyer recruitment letter on the targeted Facebook groups. So I posted this flyer in GCU doctoral dissertation milestone group, a similar focus group here that was Grand Canyon doctoral program support, and then another one Facebook group that it was our ring, the science of sleep, health tracking, and recovery. Interested adults self-selected if they met the inclusion criteria, which was if they were 18 years of age and older, if they live in the western region of the US, and then if they own a wearable fitness device. Those eligible participants self-enrolled and completed an informed consent via SurveyMonkey before scheduling the interviews. Now, with Plan A, I wasn't able to get the 20 participants that I targeted for. So I then had to execute Plan B, with the same eligibility criteria. The only difference is that I expanded into my social media page as well as LinkedIn. So that's where then I was able to obtain the 19 participants. If we go into addressing the critical feasibility item here, which I'm very embarrassed about, but I was, as a new researcher, very heads down, doing all the coding. And at the time, I had been maintaining a separate version of the code book for organizational purposes, which then led me to suppress my code book to Appendix F. I learned my lesson, and I'm very embarrassed about this, but we did talk it through, and Dr. Quinn and Dr. Glenn and I met, and we were able to reintegrate the cookbook into Appendix F, and then we conducted a final community review to verify completeness and alignment. So that is how we address the critical feasibility from AQR level 5. All right, if we go into the sources of research data, so the instruments were developed using self-determination theory as a foundation, and I created semi-structured interviews, questionnaires, as well as focus groups. They were created based on the literature review and the problem statement. So out of that, the interview questions 1 through 5 were developed to address RQ1. And then interview questions 3, 6 through 10 were to address RQ2. Focus group questions 1 through 4 were developed to address RQ1. And then focus group questions 4 through 8 were developed to address RQ2. When these were developed, I conducted a field study with 2 volunteers to evaluate questions for clarity and effectiveness. And I did confirm that it promote open dialogue and allowing my participants to just clearly articulate their thoughts and processes in relation to wearable fitness devices. Some of the additional criteria, which are demographics, I also collected were age, gender, email address, and location of where they lived, in order for me to describe that participant profile, which also allows for transferability for a future study if anybody chooses to further study my topic. Okay, so here is just an overall graph of how I deploy data collection. So once I received IRB approval, as I mentioned through Plan A and B, I recruited via social media. Participants were able to self-enroll, completed that SurveyMonkey link to then self-enroll and complete the informed consent, deploy the individual interviews and focus groups via Microsoft Teams. Then the data was downloaded, which was the audio for transcription via Otter, conducted member checking, did data analysis, and ever since the interviews were completed and the focus group, that data has been securely stored. If we go into the details of the individual interviews and the focus groups, so as I mentioned, I conducted them via Microsoft Teams for audio. The steps here that I undertook were validated the informed consent was received and signed, sent the Microsoft Team invitation with the meeting link, obtained the participants' agreement to record when we met, began the introductions and confidentiality reminder, and then followed the interview and focus group protocols that were in Appendix E. I downloaded the team audio recording, I transcribed them using Otter, and then the files were labeled as IP1 for interview participant 1 through 17, and then the focus groups with participant 18 and 19. These transcriptions were then sent to the participants for member checking, and really only 8 out of my 19 participants replied for member checking, so I decided to use the transcripts as is. During the interviews and focus groups, I did say that I'll give them a week for them to reply back to, let me know if there's any changes that needed to be made. And I did say if there was nothing to be changed, I will use them as is with their agreement. And I went ahead and did that since I only had 8 folks that responded. So here's an overall descriptive data of my participant pool. So I had a total of 19. 17 were part of the individual interview, and then 2 were part of the focus group. The age ranges here are 60% of my participants range between the ages of 25 to 34, then 68% 35 to 44, and then 16% was 85 plus. Most of my participants were female, so about 74%, and then 26% were male participants. If we go into the details of the individual interview, so the data collection for individual interviews was gathered from October 2nd through November 10th of last year. And that was 70 individual interviews that range in duration about 48 minutes and produce a mean of 15 pages in transcription length, generated 263 codes from the individual interviews, and that overall yield to an average of about 16 individual codes per interview. If we go into the focus group descriptive data, that was done November 17th of 2024. And the duration was about 53 minutes, and the transcript length was about 17 space pages with the 2 female participants. And from this focus group, it also generated about 22 codes. I did merge the interview data and the focus group data to strengthen the overall analysis of my data. As we discussed data management, as I mentioned previously, each participant was assigned that unique code. All data was stored securely in my password-protected computer, and any physical documents or notes that I had have been locked in a cabinet here in the office. Those hard copies will be retained for 3 years and shredded, and then the digital files will be permanently deleted. My data was coded manually, and it was analyzed with MaxQDA, and I'll go into detail here a little bit later. All right, so my data analysis overall was based on the foundation of Brown and Clark's 2006 6-step thematic analysis, which I mentioned before. I really used manual coding using Excel and highlighting in Word and then coding those specific words and then transcribing them to Excel. And that took quite a lot of time. And I felt that I was lost in my own codes, and I needed something else to help my brain really start organizing all the codes that the awesome participants helped me develop. So I started communicating with folks, and I learned about MaxQDA. I was a little bit intimidated about MaxQDA since I'm a new researcher. I didn't know too much about it. So I self-enrolled in a few courses, and then it seemed pretty straightforward. So what I did is I then uploaded all of my transcriptions through MaxQDA using the Excel, highlighting that I had done in Word, and started just reproducing the data that I had done manually through MaxQDA. And it allowed me to see things a little bit different. And I'll go into that in a little bit later here. But really, through the data analysis here, I was targeted to identify recurring patterns and how those describe motivation and psychological well-being related to those wearable fitness devices. The data sources were from the individual interviews and focus groups, and the total unique codes I was able to produce were 295, which then allowed me to create 15 categories and 7 final themes. So if we get into the details of Brown and Clark, so the first step here is to get familiarized with the data. So what I did here was review all the 19 participant transcriptions, became very familiar with the data at this point just by being part of Engaged, and with all the participants and all the interviews that I'd done in the focus group, I was already hearing those themes. So when I then review them, I started noticing a lot of commonality in the codes that were about to be produced. So that was phase 1. Phase 2 was that generating the initial codes. So as I mentioned, I started highlighting meaningful data segments, and that's when I now can describe a little bit more to you what I did with MaxQDA. So originally through Excel and Word, I produced about 360 codes. And again, at that point, I couldn't really figure out how to make this a little bit better. So I then imported them all into MaxQDA and started to see a lot of duplication. And it allowed me to then reduce from 360 to 295. Within MaxQDA, I was able to re-highlight areas that I had highlighted previously. And then it just allowed it to very nicely organize things in a way that made sense for my brain. So that's how I was then able to reduce it to 295. And here are some of those initial codes. So the first code here is positive impact on mental health. And the way I described this code was by saying that device enhances mood and reduces anxiety through structured exercise routines. And that was coded by participant 17, which stated, definitely improves my mood when I see each level and every time that I level up or every time that it tracks new fitness. So I coded this as positive impact on mental health. And then another one here, boosted confidence from progress reports. I explained this code as confidence improves by visualization progress from exercise data. And so participant 15 stated that half mile further and she finished 5 minutes earlier than the last walk, that helped her overall boost her confidence, and it overall improved her mental state to increase her exercise habits. So in other words, when the device provided that report and did that comparison to say, hey, you went a little bit further and you still finished 5 minutes later, it allowed participant 15 feel that boosted her confidence and wanted her to move a little more. Okay, if we move into Brown and Clark's phase 3 here, which is research or searching for themes. What I did here was I grouped codes into potential themes and look for broader patterns. So taking those 295 unique codes from XQDA and then started grouping it into categories. And it helped me develop 15 categories, and I'll go into some of them here. So when we discuss the categories here, if we talk about the first one, confidence and self-perception, some of the supporting codes were boosted confidence from progress reports, increased self-confidence, and then confidence building through self-comparison. Notice how they all have a flavor of confidence and then self-perception, but they all have slightly different flavor of what type of confidence and self-perception they're referring to. So I categorize them in that category of confidence and self-perception, and I give that description as positive feedback and data from devices enhance user confidence and overall self-image. Another one here is community and social connection. Some of the supporting codes were sense of community through activity sharing, and then social accountability and competition, community support and encouragement. The way I then described this category was as social interactions fostered by wearable fitness devices enhance psychological well-being through support, validation, and shared experiences. Again, there were 15 categories that were produced, and right now I'm only going through a few just to show you examples. Brown and Clark's step 4 is reviewing themes. So once I created those 15 categories and I started to verify themes that work in relation to the coded extracts of the entire data set. So I cross-check codes for consistency across the participants, and then I produce the various codes, so which is step 5, defining and naming those themes. So I level each of those themes to reflect this core meaning, which allow me to produce those 7 themes to finalize and supporting the participant codes. And here are some examples. So some of those themes were emotional enhancement through goal achievement, psychological challenges and dependency, social connection, enhancing psychological well-being. So if we go to the top one here, theme 1, enhance emotional states, and then confidence and self-perception were the 2 categories that I grouped into this first theme. And the way I described this theme was by saying that participants experience positive psychological impact, such as enhanced mood, happiness, satisfaction, when successfully meeting the wearable device's goals, highlighting that strong emotional value attached to the fitness tracking. Another one here is psychological challenges and dependency. So here the categories were neutral or limited psychological impact, and then psychological challenges and dependency. And the way I described this theme was by saying that participants sometimes experience negative psychological effects, such as dependency, frustration, reduced self-confidence due to the device malfunctions or failure to meet pre-established or unrealistic fitness goals, indicating a potential negative side effect of the device resilience. And I'll go into details about this particular theme because I was quite surprised when I saw the results. But to make it positive again, going into theme 4, social connectivity, enhancing psychological well-being and motivation. That is for theme 4. So the category here is community and social connection, competitive motivation, initial adoption, and external influence. And the way I described this particular theme was by saying that social interaction facilitates by device sharing features creates a sense of community and accountability, positively influencing psychological states and motivation for those participants towards increased and sustained physical activities. So these are just 3 themes that I'll go into details today. And once I produce a report, which is next, I'll go into more detail here. So Brown and Clark, step 6 is producing the report. So what I did here is I integrated the findings with self-determination theory, synthesized the narratives, and then aligned them to the research questions. And here they are. So if you recall, RQ1 was, how do wearables have an impact on psychological well-being? And RQ2 was, how does motivation for those wearable users engage in physical activity? So what does that, cause? And so if we started if we start with theme one here, so emotional enhancement through goal achievement. So emotional states was a category, and then confidence and self-perception. The supporting code here was positive perception and establishing a daily routine. Participant 12 stated, when I do hit my goals for physical activity, a boost in my mood feels better. I feel better. I feel more accomplished at something. So that was what participant 12 stated. And that's in relation to RQ1, which was that component of psychological well-being. Theme 2 here, anxiety and stress reduction through device interaction. The supporting category was reduce anxiety and stress, and the supporting code was anxiety relief. And then participant 17 stated, the gym definitely affects my mental health because it's kind of my anxiety relief. And that is meeting RQ1, the psychological well-being of my study. Team 3, which is the one that I told you I was quite surprised about, was the psychological challenges and dependencies. So the supporting category here was psychological challenges and dependencies, and then neutral or limited psychological impact with supporting codes, negative self-perception linked to device feedback, and then neutral psychological response, which again, answer RQ1, and participant 16 stated that it didn't really in any way create a positive of negative influence. But then participant 17 stated, I feel like when it's not working, I get frustrated, meaning that if the device is not giving them active feedback or it stops working, they just feel frustrated. And oftentimes they just stop the workout because it's not going to count. All right, so if we go into theme 4, the social connectivity enhancing psychological well-being, we discussed that where it does create that sense of community and it empowers and allowed users to feel that sense of connection. And that was related to RQ1 and 2, which participant 15 stated is good because it's positive when it's like something we could do together, like go on a walk. Hey, you start my watch and I start mine. And then theme 5 here, habit formation and routine integration. The supporting categories were habit formation and consistency and goal-oriented motivation. The supporting codes were habit formation, motivation to close those rings. And then participant 11 stated the habits have been increasing because of it. I'm being more consistent with the habits, meaning moving and staying active, which was to answer motivation to engage in physical activities described in RQ2. Theme 6, the influence of real-time feedback and reminders. So the supporting categories here were reminders and notifications, feedback and data visualization. The supporting codes were timely reminders as behavioral prompts to move, and then feedback as a motivational push. And that answer RQ2. And the quote here from participant 10 stated, if I do not move within the hour, it will tell me that it's time to get up and move, which again, that meets RQ2, motivation to engage in physical activities. And then the last theme here is data-informed adaptations in behavior and lifestyle, which the supporting codes were adjustments and adaptations, calorie tracking, influence behavior, intrinsic motivation and self-determination, and the supporting codes were adjusting physical effort, and then calorie tracking and energy balance. Participant 4 stated, I need to track calories in order to lose some pounds. So that particular feature is important to me when I'm trying to lose pounds. And that addressed RQ2. And that is overall how I produce and did all the data analysis components and ensuring that all of this aligned to SDT and then ensuring that it answered my 2 research questions. All right, so informing the problem space, how did this study address the problem? So as I stated before, I did explore how adults describe the influence of wearables and motivation to psychological well-being. By the 3 researchers here, News, Safat, and Roop, they did identify that they were a need to look into qualitative insights explaining why and how wearables affect user behavior. And I do believe through this study, I contributed new understanding on the psychological experiences underlying that sustained device engagement and well-being. Really, the alignment with the literature, as I described before, with the findings from News and Toad, and then the themes from habit formation and social connectivity by Roop and Sin. Um, Again, it describes that wearable fitness devices increase motivation, and it does also have emotional connection and the well-being of the users. But I feel my research here also expanded further into the framework by showing how emotional and motivational effects develop through that device interaction, and how it can also cause psychological challenges, right? Such as that device dependency and anxiety when goals are not met, which was again very surprising to me to see the data, and how some folks really had that psychological challenge when the device, they didn't use the device, or they felt anxiety from it when it was constantly pushing them to do things. So contrasting the insights. So while the previous research emphasized that adults value the ability of wearables to track physical activity and share the data, again, I do feel challenges such as device dependency and data-induced anxiety were something that this study found. And then these nuances provide a more well-balanced understanding of technology dual influence, both on the empowering component and potentially creating stress, which then it further creates that expansion of knowledge, right? Where SDT, in all does meet the autonomy component, the competence and relatedness that are directly shaped through device features such as real-time feedback and social connection. And it does allow for practical implications for fitness and health professionals, as well as device designers, to support sustainable motivation and mental well-being. If we move into strengths, weaknesses, and limitations, the key strengths for my study were that I did generate rich qualitative data, capturing adults' lived experiences with wearables and how they impacted their well-being and their desire to move more. I did use Brown and Clark's 2006 phase thematic analysis to be able to get into coding and understand the overall themes and categories. I did produce 17 semi-structured interviews and one tiny focus groups of 2 participants, which then provided, core questions to be able to get into the depth and reflection of the lived experiences of my participants, integrating, self-determination theory as that theoretical framework to understand motivation and psychological well-being. And if we move into the key limitations here, so the key limitations, really, I only focus in adults in the Western US. My sample size was just 19 participants, which really, it limited the transferability, but it did provide good, solid data. Another key limitation here is self-report bias, right? So possible recall or social desirability effects in the responses. And then cross-sectional design, meaning I capture experiences at a single point in time, and I didn't measure the long-term behavioral change of these devices. So how does this connect to the theory, right? So again, it was all related to self-determination theory, related to autonomy, competence, and relatedness. The findings do support SDT by showing how wearable devices fulfill the basic psychological needs through feedback, choice, and social connection. And as I stated, it did introduce new insights into that device-induced anxiety and dependency, suggesting the need to further expand SDT to account for technology dependence. If we go into recommendations for future research, so in my opinion, I think we need to expand participant diversity and context. So broaden that research beyond just the Western US. Includes diverse groups, cultures, and potentially socioeconomic backgrounds. That way it enhances transferability and understanding the motivation and psychological responses to wearables globally. Another recommendation here is to employ longitudinal qualitative designs. So move beyond cross-sectional designs, capture the evolving motivation, engagement, and emotional impact over time, and then understand the long-term benefits and potential device fatigue or dependency. And then last year, examine specific device features or dual experiences, right? Although I capture what type of device my participants had, I didn't really include this as part of my study, but it would be great to know if another research would like to, get into the deeper understanding of my topic is understanding if, a watch has a different response from the ring or the band and seeing if results would vary by device type. And then really also looking into those distinct features, goal tracking, reminders, and social connectivity to be able to explore that dual experiences as both, right, motivators and stressors, since that's a key finding from my study, the stressor component. And then most likely, complete further review on SDT to potentially include a technology-induced theoretical framework to be able to expand it further. So utilize SDT and also potentially another technology uh, theoretical framework for a future study. All right, so if we go into the theoretical implications, so the findings affirm that SDT core needs of autonomy, competence, relatedness through goal achievement, feedback, and social connection were met. Overall, transforming the digital tracking into experiences of motivation, accountability, and psychological fulfillment. Um, Really, this extends to include that emotional behavior regulation via technology, so stress reduction, adapted lifestyle changes, and then highlights the dual effect devices can enhance motivation or create that dependency and frustration. If we go into the theoretical contribution, so my study did propose a redefined model of motivation and well-being, acknowledging both empowering and adverse outcomes of self-tracking, which really positions wearable fitness devices as digital mediators that can shape modern self-determined behavior. If we discuss now the practical implications, so my study did enhance motivation and well-being. It supported that emotional regulation, and then it also, included that encouragement of social accountability. It also promoted that the balance feature, but really, it's only balance when adults are able to develop healthier relationships with technology by using them as supportive rather than those controlling tools. And if I go now into the doctoral experience reflection, really, this journey has been truly life-changing for me. I am a first-gen scholar. Earning my doctoral degree is really all about breaking barriers and improving to myself and my family and the community that everything is possible. I did have here on my wall this that I bolded how it says, God isn't asking you to figure it out, but it's asking you to trust that He already has. That stuck to me through this whole challenge because my study did begin August 1st of 2019. So it's been 6 years, 3 months, 3 days. But through resilience, perseverance, and dedication, I've overcome more than I could ever imagine. If we go into describing how the doctoral journey enhanced my growth as a professional, this process has made me a stronger and more intentional leader. I feel that I have more patience, and something I really learned was trusting the process. There were days that I just couldn't figure out how to overcome something, and just trusting the process and ensuring that I overcome that barrier really helped me, just overall grow as a professional and really grow as a human being. If we go into describing what I learned about research, really, it's more than just getting to the weeds of data, right? It's also about learning about people and their stories. It takes a lot of patience and humbleness and curiosity. Listening to my participants share how wearable fitness devices affect their motivation to move and also improve their mental health, reminded me how powerful tools can be and then how powerful our voices are. And if I describe here my next steps with my profession and how I'll use my doctoral degree, my next step really is to move by using my PhD for a more mentoring and potentially, part-time teaching. I'd like to use my doctoral degree to help others, specifically my first-gen Latina professionals, since we only hold about less than 1% of the doctoral degrees in the US. And I do want to say that I want to thank GCU primarily because if it wasn't for this non-traditional courses, I would have not been able, to get my Bachelor of Science through GCU, then my master's, and now my PhD. So if it wasn't for this type of models, I probably would have never been able to accomplish this higher education degree, really because, family struggles and by being first gen, I've had to work since high school. But GCU made it happen. And that is it. What kind of questions do you have for me?
Hmm. Well, first off, uh, thank you for that presentation. Good job. Um, yes, and we will have some questions. Um, now on the you mentioned some future research. What are you looking if you were going to do some research? Are you even thinking
Mhm.
about doing some you know, a follow-up study or anything?
I think I need a little break,
Well,
but
I
I think,
understand that. That's fine, but I'm just saying.
but yes, I really wanted to explore more the devices, right? Like the ring versus the watch versus the arm. I've heard of something called Swoop that is out there too. I think that the features in general would be something that I would like to further explore, only because um, for me personally, I have the Aura ring and I have the watch, and the Aura ring really just has a holistic approach of everything that's happening in your body, right? Not only from sleep, not being able to get enough sleep to activity levels and things like that. So I wonder if this devices really can enhance further and not become that stressor that some folks describe in my study. So I think overall, looking into that device type and the feature that it has and doing a study understanding if the device type would make a difference and how these devices can be further enhanced to really help us be more motivated and really be more active. So I think
Mhm.
yes, I would like to explore the study a little bit further.
Sounds very good. Now I have something to ask you. Now, you said he's going to look at the difference. So how would you go about doing that? I mean, as far as the study
Differences.
went.
There was this technology acceptance theory that obviously I wasn't looking into the technology acceptance theory as my theoretical framework for this study, but I want to learn more about it and see how that in connection with SDT could give me better results on, is it a device dependency? Is it a device issue that will help me then determine how else could I further evaluate this study, if I do the various device type. So I think in that, generally speaking, because I was only focusing on motivation and psychological well-being, SDT was the ideal framework. I didn't, again, want to have my study too broad and also include, device type and what type of features really did it have. I wanted to just know, did it really motivate you and did it also help you move, right? It's sort of where I wanted to study. And so if I further take the study to the next level, I would include another theory that I learned not long ago and learn more about the technology acceptance theory that I heard about.
All right, one more thing. If you do that, then you're probably going to have to look at it a little bit differently as far as methodologies go. So you'd have to
We
move
will be
away
quantitative, right? We'll be
from quantitative.
quantitative.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. All right. That's all the questions I have. Dr. Glenn, you're next.
Good job, Michelle.
Thank
Nicely
you.
done. Very thorough. Great presentation. So, Michelle, you had originally you had proposed 20 participants, but ended up with 17 and two
Mhm.
focus groups and ended up with one with only two participants. So how do you justify that the reduced sample still provided adequate data to answer your RQs?
Yeah. So the fact that I produced those 360 codes and the data really just show a lot of commonality. And when I started developing the categories and the codes, I obviously I wasn't really done yet with all my all my interviews and my focus groups, but I just started to hear the same common themes over and over again. And I talked to Dr. Quinn and I said, hey, Dr. Quinn, I still have to do a handful of more. do I keep, aiming for that 20%? So he asked me at that point, how many initial codes do you have? And I expressed to him the quantity that I had at that moment. And he said, I think you've met your data. So you've reached that point, he said. So it's totally fine if you don't continue seeking for that additional participant, so one participant, and then one focus group should meet the criteria for the dissertation process, is what he had mentioned.
Okay. All right. So you stated that 8 participants confirmed transcript accuracy, and the remaining non-respondents transcripts were used as is.
Mm-hmm.
How did you ensure that member checking procedures did not compromise trustworthiness?
Yeah, so I heard the transcripts quite a few times, ensure that everything that I heard was transcribed clearly and concisely. I reiterated to my participants that I will give them a week, and I, emailed them and had a tracker to let me know when that week passed. If they didn't reply, I used them as is based on me being the researcher and overhearing the information, ensure that it was as accurate as I possibly could decode it through me hearing the transcript multiple times.
Okay. So how did you verify the accuracy in your descriptive statistics, such as age distribution, prior to your reporting them? Did you check it at all?
I didn't verify ID per se, but I did make it part of my self-enrollment statistics, right? So when they self-enroll in there, they added their name, the area where they live, their age, and their email address. So that data was then aggregated into a spreadsheet, and I was able to validate, their last name, their first name, their age, their region, that they all met that inclusion criteria. I didn't again necessarily check for ID, but I trusted that if they self-enroll, they were being, true with what they were self-enrolling for.
Yeah, good. So 75% were females, were
Yes.
women. So how does that affect you know your, is that sampling bias? How does that affect transferability and
Yeah.
running those?
Um, yeah. So I mean, overall, we would need to understand, right, if we need to further evaluate the study and broaden it, right? It was all self-inclusion. I didn't have a target to say folks have to be 50-50 of any sort. It was posted via the various groups, posted via my social media. So really it was all self-inclusion, right, from the participants. As part of a future study, maybe they'll have to set that goal, right? To say, to make this a more inclusive study, we need a target of 50-50 so that we're looking at the population holistically and not, so female driven.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. Last but not least, you report 362 initial codes,
360.
225,
Yeah, 360.
360, okay.
Mm-hmm.
295 final unique codes, is that right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
15 categories
15
and
categories.
7 themes.
Correct.
Okay. So what criteria did you apply to collapse codes and categories? And how did you
Yeah.
determine when to remove possible overlapping themes?
Yeah, so when I started creating, if we can see the analysis here, when I started to see emotional enhancement through goal achievement, right? The way I started collapsing themes was really along the lines of what did the code give me? And then is the code related to that particular theme and category, or could it bleed into another one, right? So then what I did, I further heard the participant quote, right? What did they specifically tell me? And then that's how I then determined, okay, that one belongs in theme 1, category 1. If I didn't have those recordings, it would be very hard to really point him in the right category and theme. So really understanding what the participants said, and then what was the goal of that question being asked, right? Was it to answer RQ1 or answer RQ2?
Good. Good. That's all I have, Michelle. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Kim, I'm gonna ask you to go next.
Got it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Quinn. Wow, Michelle, great job.
Thank you.
Um, I forget how many years it's been since you sat out in this room and we worked together and you told me you want to do something about watches. And I said, oh my gosh, I look at the growth you've made the last few years and you really understand. I think you have a great topic and you have some good data that I think can be utilized. It actually encouraged me to buy my own fitness watch. So, and I use it to keep, end up getting out of my chair every day here, residency and get up when it beeps and it says, stand up and walk. So I
And
see that. I did have a couple of questions for you. Due to the fact that you were sitting here a few years ago, and I don't remember when it was, it doesn't matter. But what would you tell the 15 students sitting in our room now in their second A83 residency? Maybe a tip or a trick or something that you went through where you had that, aha moment to where maybe they're now like struggling and something you could maybe help them with. Any thoughts?
if I take myself back to that day, I was clueless. I did not know where to start. I felt I was not going to be able to complete this degree. I felt that all these theoretical frameworks that I need to figure out what best fits, my study, which one should I pick? But if it wasn't from the guidance from you and Dr. Harshman at the time, I probably would still be going, in circles trying to figure it out. So really just being patient and trusting, your mentors and those folks that are willing to help you understand where to go with your study. Utilize your resources, right? DCU has DC Network, and understanding all the various things that you should be able to be focusing on. So really just taking one step at a time, trusting that you're here for the right reasons and that you'll overcome whatever challenge that you're faced with. Generally speaking, when you go to residency, you're there to learn, to network, and to be able to understand what is needed to go to the next level. I remember I did my proposal presentation with you, Dr. Kimball and Harshman, and at the time, I I knew what I was talking about, but I didn't really understand it holistically, right? And so when I was producing my final defense, I actually had to open up my proposal defense to then tie it back to my final defense because there were pieces that I said that I was going to do, which I describe in my dissertation, that I could piggyback to that and use it for my final defense. So again, in general, use your resources, don't stress too much. If you are able to do one little thing every day is better than nothing. It's one thing that I personally had to do, right? There were days that having a full-time job and working 7 to 6 sometimes, taking a mental break and then going at it is better than not doing any progress. And you'll get there. You'll definitely get there like I did after 6 years, 3 months and 3 days.
It's great. Thank you. And my final question is on one of your last slides, you said you made the comment that you say God isn't asking you to figure it out. He's asking you to trust that he already has. You said trust the
Mm-hmm.
process. Here at
Mm-hmm.
GCU, we have many different processes to follow. I've been here 15 years. A lot of things have changed with templates and guidelines and so forth. But how did you utilize some of those tools to get you to this point? If you could just briefly, maybe like 1 to 2 minutes share.
Yeah, I started this journey right in 2019, and a lot of formatting has changed, and a lot of template had changed. So, working with my committee, we were able to agree what template to use, what template not to use. But really, just going into the DC network and understanding all the various tools that are there for us, help you just self-learn the areas that you should, but also utilizing your chair as the main key person to help bridge those gap in knowledge that you may still not have. And utilizing also, the Facebook groups out there, networking with folks in your same class, being able to keep that connection with those folks to be able to ensure that, you're doing the right thing and not working in silo, right? Because you do have a community of all of us here that are willing to help and are there for you in the event that you have any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's all I have. Thanks,
Mhm.
Michelle. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Quinn.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Kimball. Dr. Lawrence?
Thanks. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Let's see here. Where did my questions go? Okay. Dr. Glenn stole a couple of my questions, but I may still be able to, sort of ask it a different way slightly. Let me ask about your focus group.
Mhm.
Had a focus group of 2 participants. That's barely a focus group. Can you explain how that happened, first of all?
Yeah. So the focus group, when I had the 17 individual interviews, I described that I will have a focus group, right? And so I asked Dr. Quinn, I said, hey, Dr. Quinn, I have X amount of codes. Should I just make the last 2 to 3 participants, since I had stated I needed to do 20 participants, if I just make the last focus group or the last 3 participants into a focus group, is that valid? Does that meet the guideline? So he stated, in a sense, yes. And so I went ahead and just made the last 3 self-enrolled participants part of a focus group, and only 2 showed up during the focus group, that I had. The questions were different, but still within the same RQ1, RQ2 components. So it did also give me additional 22 codes, right? But it was so small. But the content in general, I still enjoyed it very much because it was just, that group setting. And one person was saying, it allows me to feel more motivated. And the other one was telling me, well, it doesn't really do much for me. So just hearing that contrasting of opinions was really fun, which I think if the focus group would have had more people, it would have been good to have, but maybe it would have created a little bit hard to understand things in a virtual environment. But overall, I feel, I got the experience of at least my tiny focus group, and it still produced, those 22 unique codes in general.
Yeah, no shows are notoriously common in focus groups. And so I usually recommend that people try to aim for, a bigger focus group, as big as they feel like they can handle. Novice researchers are probably better off with smaller focus groups, but usually that's more in the range of like 4 to 6 or 5 to 7, something like that. Because a professional, they'll have a focus group of like 20, and that's like nothing.
Exactly.
Um, and so if you end up with 4 people signed up for your focus group and 1 doesn't show up, it's 3 is still also on the smaller side. 2 is like I said, barely a focus group. Now, did they like interact with each other, or were they just answering your questions, or how did it go?
Yeah, they were interacting with each other, but they were primarily just answering questions, right? And they were just, again, sort of saying, well, that I don't feel that way, and the other person will say, well, it motivates me, right? Like I use it. If I remember, one of them stated, I use the heart rate feature to make sure to adjust my workout routines, right? When I've exerted a certain level of heart rate, I then slow it down to make sure that I don't over increase my stamina and being able to then get better results. And the other person said, oh, I didn't even know that feature existed. Little things like that where it was nice to hear various opinions and perspectives on how they use the wearables. And during that focus group, one of the participants also stated that they had gone on a trip and they walked forever, and that she was so excited to know that she had met over the 10K steps, right? And she would have never known that unless she had the watch. And so she was very happy to know that. And the other person stated something along the lines of, oh, that's just a normal thing for me to do, hit those steps every day. They're just different perspectives from the focus group participants.
Okay, makes sense. And you mentioned that you had your both your interview and focus group questions sort of divvied out to align with different research questions.
I did.
But yet you had one theme that addressed both research questions. How did that happen?
Yes. So during that specific question, I just asked what were pretty much like the corresponding alignment, right? Like if you're active and it produces that, need of wanting to feel better, I created that question to be able to align both and see if the results will show me that linkage, right? If in fact when they're moving, if it produces that happiness in the user. So that's how I was able to create that specific question to align both, and seeing when I started asking the participants if that will, give me the results that I was looking for, which it did. But then in other questions, it stated that they felt anxious and felt that, it was causing more harm than positiveness.
Okay, so you actually had an interview question that it was supposed to align with both RQ1 and RQ2.
Correct. Yeah.
And so that theme 4, was it derived basically from one interview question?
In a sense, yeah. But when I was hearing similar themes in the other questions, I was also able to put some of those answers and codes into that other theme. Because, RQ1 was looking into motivation, right? And RQ2 was looking into physical activities. While that one question did grab both, other questions were also bucketed into that theme because they were separated.
Okay, makes sense. And then I guess just you had 295 final codes, which is a fair amount. I mean, that's a large number. And you reduce those 295 codes to 15 categories. That's I mean, if they were evenly distributed, which they probably weren't, that would be almost 20 codes per category. That sounds like a pretty, significant task. How did you do that? Like logistically, I guess. Did you have to do it and redo it over and over? How did you manage to do that, I guess is my question.
Yeah. So when I put them in Excel, I started a code, right? And then when I added them to MaxQDA, I just started trying to link different categories, and then some categories were not making any sense. But then when I gave it a specific theme, then it started to make more sense. And so really re-listening to the participants' quotes and all the statements that they gave me and utilizing MaxQDA to help me stay organized was the way that I really was able to stick to the overall methodology. Because to your point, when I was just hand coding, I was all over the place. I've had a lot of things that were just not organized in any way. So through MaxQDA I was able to stay honest, make sure that I was grouping the right codes into the right categories, and then ensuring that those categories were then grouped into those themes. So organizing them.
Yeah. So how did you use any visualizations or anything like that? Like thematic mapping? I know MaxQDA has some kind of cool tools of some sort. It's been a while since I've looked at it though.
Yeah. I was able to color code them. I don't know if you could see here, the blue. So I was able to color code them in that sense, and that helped that visualization a little bit. Also, when I was in Excel, I was able to started grouping them, kind of grabbing them from one bucket of codes and then putting them into Excel, into the various categories and themes. But not until, again, I started using MaxQDA is when it made a little bit more sense for me. And I felt that overall my data was good, and that I was being honest with the way that I did the data analysis.
So you were like nesting codes in the code structure.
Correct.
And so you would just sort of say, I think that these codes go with this idea, a category,
Correct.
and
Mhm.
sort of stick it, drag them into the, I can't remember,
Correct.
do you drag them or I think you have to click and click or
You
something like
click,
that.
yeah. You click, you define it, and then you click and color code it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then with Max QDA, you can see all of the quotes that are associated with a particular code, which is nice.
Exactly.
The downside is that your codes are in your code system are not necessarily organized until you organize them yourself.
Correct.
Which then means you might have similar codes or conceptually related codes all over the place. I find that to be hard. And
It was.
yeah, notes
I
help.
Yeah, I think if I do a future research, I either need to get very good at Max QDA or find another tool, because it was the most stressful part of my dissertation, trying to organize the codes, the categories, and the themes. So I think personally, I either need to get very good at Max QDA or find a better way for coding. I did it, but I would
Yeah.
say I spent a lot of time making sure that I felt comfortable with the codes that I was producing categories and themes.
Yeah, Max QDA is really good at organizing your codes, at the coding process and organizing the codes so that you have all of the data that are associated with each code. It's really good but it's not so good, in my opinion, at the part where you go from codes to categories and categories to themes, unless you use their fancy tools, which I know they have, but I haven't personally used. I can't even remember what they're called, but there's some data visualization and coding magic. I don't know, whatever, but it
Yeah.
helps you to see things a little bit better. But you have to learn how to use that tool, which honestly I haven't done.
Yeah.
And they're probably useful if you do that. But if you just look at a list of codes, I think it can be really hard, especially when you have 295 of them.
Yeah.
So
It was tough. It definitely was tough. I was sweating. It was tough.
Yeah. Well, 295 is a good number of codes. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's too much. It's just, it makes it hard to go to that next step. And so it's challenging, I guess I should say. I don't necessarily recommend that you reduce the number of codes, but maybe if you had, 900, I would say, okay, maybe that's too many. Okay, well, that's all the questions I have. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Well, good job, Michelle, on answering those questions. I do remember when you finished coding and got it all put together, and you just didn't feel right. You said, Dr. Quinn, I just don't feel right at this point, so I need to go back and work on this.
Yeah.
You spent about another 4 to 5 weeks on it before she got back, because I'd check on her and make sure, and she was like, I'm just making sure I know this data back and forth, and she sure enough did that. So, all right, thank you, Michelle. At this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put you in the waiting room, and everybody else that's in here will also go off to just a committee, and we'll deliberate for a little, and then we'll get back with you here, and I'll pull you back into the room, and we'll talk about it. All right.
Thank you.
All right.